Deep in the Amazon rainforest, the air grew heavy with dread as a monstrous anaconda coiled itself tighter around a screaming capybara, its cries echoing through the swamp. The capybara thrashed wildly, its claws scraping uselessly against the mud, but the serpent's muscles only constricted harder. Each squeeze forced the air from its lungs, the sound of bones creaking beneath the crushing pressure. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. Birds scattered from the trees above, and the ripples of the struggle spread across the murky water like warning signals. The capybara's desperate squeals cut through the dense humidity, reaching the ears of a small rescue team patrolling nearby. At first they froze, unsure if what they heard was real. But then another cry, sharper, weaker, pierced the silence. They knew they had no time to waste. Armed with nothing but poles, ropes, and their own courage, the team raced through the undergrowth, pushing past vines and branches until they burst into the clearing. What they saw made their blood run cold. The massive anaconda, thicker than a man's torso, coiled mercilessly around the helpless animal. Its yellow eyes glistened in the dim light, unblinking, as it tightened its death grip. The rescuers exchanged a single glance. They would have only one chance to act. One of the rescuers shouted, distracting the serpent, while another thrust a long wooden pole between the coils. The anaconda hissed, its massive head whipping around with terrifying speed, jaws gaping wide to strike. The men stumbled back, hearts pounding, but they held their ground. The capybara's eyes bulged with panic, its body twitching as the pressure around its chest grew unbearable. Mud churned beneath its hooves, but it could no longer fight. Every second mattered. With trembling hands, one of the rescuers looped a rope around the snake's thick body, pulling with all his strength. The anaconda writhed violently, its scales slick with river water, but the combined force of 3 men prying at its coils began to loosen the grip. Inch by inch, the jungle erupted with noise. Birds shrieked overhead, and monkeys barked warnings from the treetops as though the entire forest knew a battle was raging. Finally, with a desperate heave, the rescuers managed to free the capybara's chest. It gasped, lungs filling with air in ragged bursts. But the anaconda wasn't finished. The serpent lunged, snapping its jaws just inches from one man's arm. He fell backward into the mud, eyes wide in horror as the anaconda twisted toward him. In that instant, another rescuer swung his pole down hard, striking the snake across the head. The impact echoed through the swamp, and the great serpent recoiled, hissing furiously. The moment of hesitation was enough. The men pulled the capybara free, dragging its limp but breathing body to the safety of the bank. The anaconda, frustrated and enraged, slipped back into the water with a ripple, vanishing beneath the surface. But its golden eyes lingered above the waterline for a moment longer, watching, waiting. The rescuers shivered. They knew this wasn't over. The capybara lay on the muddy riverbank, sides heaving as it sucked in shallow breaths. Its fur was matted with slime, its body trembling with shock. One of the rescuers knelt beside it, gently stroking its damp coat, whispering soft words to calm the terrified creature. Behind them, the river was silent again. Too silent. The anaconda had vanished beneath the surface, leaving only ripples that faded quickly into the stillness of the swamp. "Is it gone?" one man muttered, scanning the dark water nervously. Another shook his head. "Number, it's waiting. They always wait." The group exchanged uneasy glances. They had faced danger before, but the sheer size of this serpent was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It wasn't just an attack, it felt like a warning. They built a small enclosure for the capybara nearby, feeding it, tending to its wounds. Days passed and the animal grew stronger. The villagers praised the rescuers for their courage, their names spreading as heroes who had defied the jaws of death. But in the dense jungle beyond the river, something stirred. At night, faint ripples disturbed the calm surface, as if a massive body was sliding just beneath. Shadows moved where no shadows should be. The giant anaconda had not forgotten, and its hunger had only grown. On the 3rd night after the rescue, the jungle air grew heavier, thick with the smell of damp earth and stagnant water. The villagers slept lightly, their huts glowing faintly from the dying embers of their fires. Somewhere nearby, the capybara rested inside its makeshift pen, calmer now, unaware of the danger creeping ever closer. The first sign came with the silence. Frogs that had croaked all evening fell mute. Crickets ceased their endless song. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then, a ripple. From the black surface of the river, two golden eyes rose slowly above the waterline. They glowed faintly in the moonlight, unblinking, fixed on the shore. The enormous body of the anaconda stirred beneath the current, coiling and uncoiling with terrifying patience. One of the rescuers, standing guard with a lantern, felt the hairs on his arms rise. He stepped closer to the riverbank, squinting at the still water. Nothing moved, but the silence screamed louder than any sound. Behind him, the capybara let out a sharp squeal, thrashing against the wooden walls of its pen. It sensed what the humans could not see. The guard turned, raising his lantern. And that's when he saw it. A dark shape, massive and sinuous, sliding out of the water and onto the bank with horrifying speed. The anaconda had returned, and this time, it wasn't after just one victim. The guard's lantern shook in his trembling hand, casting wild shadows across the trees. The massive body of the anaconda glistened in the moonlight, each scale catching the pale glow like armor. It moved with terrifying grace, dragging its bulk silently across the mud toward the pen where the capybara thrashed in panic. "Despertin!" the guard screamed, his voice breaking the stillness of the village. "The snake! The snake has returned!" Within seconds, other rescuers stumbled from their huts, clutching spears, torches, anything they could find. The villagers gathered, their eyes wide with horror as they saw the monster unfurling across the clearing. It was even larger than they remembered, its coils thicker than tree trunks, its tongue flicking in and out, tasting the air. The capybara's cries grew frantic, the sound slicing through the night like a siren. The animal rammed itself against the flimsy wooden bars of its enclosure, desperate to escape. But the anaconda was already upon it. With a surge of impossible speed, the snake struck. Its body slammed against the pen, splintering the wood with a crack. The villagers shouted, torches raised high, but none dared get too close. The rescuers' hearts pounded. They had saved the capybara once, but this time the predator seemed unstoppable. The anaconda's coils poured forward like living chains, wrapping around the shattered enclosure, tightening, crushing. And as the villagers looked on in paralyzed terror, they realized the horror had only just begun. The capybara's desperate squeals grew sharper, echoing into the jungle night. Splinters of wood flew as the anaconda's massive body shattered the pen completely. In a single fluid motion, the serpent coiled tighter, its scales grinding against the broken beams, its weight pressing down like an avalanche. The rescuers surged forward, shouting, their torches flaring in the darkness. Flames reflected in the snake's unblinking golden eyes, but it did not retreat. If anything, the firelight only made its presence more menacing, a shadow that could not be banished. One man jabbed at its coils with a spear, the metal tip glancing off its slick scales. The anaconda whipped its head toward him, jaws opening wide. The villager stumbled back, barely avoiding the strike, his screams swallowed by the night. The others circled, trying to distract the beast, but it was too strong, too relentless. Every movement was calculated, ancient, as though it had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. The capybara writhed within its crushing grip, eyes wide, its cries growing weaker. And then, with a horrifying sound, the coils tightened. The air itself seemed to vanish from the clearing. The villagers froze, realizing the nightmare they thought was over had only just reached its peak. The jungle, vast and eternal, watched in silence. The serpent had come not just for a meal, but for vengeance. The clearing descended into chaos. Villagers shouted over one another, torches waving, their shadows leaping wildly across the trees. Yet the anaconda remained undeterred, every coil flexing with lethal power. The capybara's cries had weakened into ragged squeals, muffled by the crushing embrace. A rescuer lunged with his spear again, this time driving the point deep into the serpent's side. The snake recoiled, a furious hiss erupting from its throat as it whipped its body violently, knocking two men to the ground. The torch of one fell into the mud, extinguishing instantly, plunging half the clearing into darkness. The capybara thrashed one last time, its eyes rolling with terror. The snake's jaws opened, fangs glistening in the firelight, poised to end the struggle once and for all. "Hold the torches higher!" one of the rescuers cried desperately. The flames flickered against the serpent's massive head, but it did not back down. Its tongue flicked rapidly, tasting the air, tasting the fear. The villagers stood frozen, torn between courage and terror. They had saved the capybara once before, but now the jungle itself seemed to have turned against them. And as the anaconda coiled tighter, lifting its prey from the broken wood, the truth became horrifyingly clear. This was no ordinary hunt. The beast had returned with purpose. The giant snake reared its head, the moonlight glinting off its wet scales, and the capybara dangled helplessly in its crushing coils. The villagers shouted in panic, brandishing their torches, but the firelight seemed powerless against the sheer weight of the beast's hunger. The capybara gave a weak cry, its final plea, and the sound cut through the night like a knife. The rescuers, who had once been celebrated as heroes, now stood paralyzed, their courage trembling in the face of a nightmare too vast to fight. One of them broke free from the paralysis and charged forward, driving his spear deep into the serpent's neck. The anaconda convulsed, the force of its thrash knocking the man back with bone-shattering strength. He landed hard, gasping for air, as the snake's massive body writhed like a living storm. The capybara was slipping away. Its eyes fluttered, its body limp, yet the snake did not relent. Every coil tightened further, pulling it toward jaws wide enough to swallow it whole. The villagers could only watch, their torches flickering in their trembling hands. The forest itself seemed to lean in closer. Every sound silenced except for the crack of branches under the snake's violent movements and the fading cries of its prey. The rescuers realized with horror that the battle was no longer theirs to win. The jungle had made its choice. The anaconda's body rippled with terrifying strength, muscles coiling like steel cables around the capybara. Every squeeze drew a chorus of cracking wood from the ruined pen and muffled gasps from the villagers, who dared not get too close. The capybara's squeals had weakened to faint whimpers, its legs kicking feebly in the air. Still, its wide, terrified eyes locked onto the rescuers, as though pleading for the miracle that had once saved it before. The rescuers exchanged frantic glances. They had fought the beast once and won, but now the serpent seemed to have learned, to have grown more ruthless. It ignored the torches, shrugged off the spears, and focused entirely on its prey. A sudden thrash sent waves of mud and water spraying into the crowd. Villagers stumbled back, clutching their children, their faces masks of horror. The firelight flickered wildly, shadows twisting like phantoms across the clearing. Then the serpent lifted its head higher, the capybara still locked within its coils, suspended in the air. Its jaws gaped open, black and cavernous, saliva glistening in the fire's glow. The villagers froze. This was it. The beast had returned not just to feed, but to finish what had once been stolen from it. The clearing pulsed with fear. Every villager stood frozen, their torches trembling, their voices caught in their throats. The anaconda held its prize high, coils flexing with unstoppable force, as though it wanted them all to witness the inevitable. The capybara twitched weakly, its cries now no more than faint, pitiful squeaks. Its chest rose and fell in shallow bursts, each breath stolen by the crushing weight around its body. Yet its eyes, wide and glistening, still darted toward the rescuers, pleading, begging for them to intervene. But the rescuers could only stand in helpless silence. The monster's sheer size, the raw power in every movement, had stripped them of the courage they once carried. They knew one wrong step would mean not only the capybara's end, but their own. The serpent lowered its head, jaws opening wider than any man's shoulders. A sickening hiss cut through the night air as its tongue flickered, tasting the fear that drenched the clearing. With one swift movement, the coils constricted again, and the muffled sound of bones straining echoed into the jungle. The villagers gasped. Some turned away, clutching each other, while others stared in paralyzed horror. The forest around them seemed to close in tighter, its shadows deeper, its silence more absolute. The beast had made its claim, and nothing in that moment could stop what was about to happen. The villagers' cries wavered between desperation and silence, their torches flickering in the damp night air. All eyes fixed on the monstrous serpent as it tightened its coils one final time. The capybara's limbs twitched helplessly, its once frantic thrashing now reduced to feeble spasms. The anaconda tilted its massive head, golden eyes glinting as though savoring the moment. Its tongue flickered rapidly, brushing against the capybara's fur, tasting its terror. One of the rescuers broke from the crowd with a roar, raising his spear high. He charged, plunging the tip toward the serpent's head, but the beast reacted with lightning speed. Whipping its tail around, it struck him with such force that he was hurled backward into the mud. The spear slipped from his hand, clattering uselessly to the ground. Gasps rippled through the villagers. Fear clamped down tighter than the coils themselves. None dared take another step forward. The capybara's eyes glazed, its chest barely moving. The rescuers, once hailed as heroes, now stood powerless as the predator reclaimed its dominion. And then, with horrifying inevitability, the anaconda widened its jaws, the black abyss of its throat gaping open. Saliva glistened in the torchlight as the villagers watched, transfixed in terror. The jungle had chosen its victor. The serpent lowered its head with deliberate slowness, jaws opening wider, unhinging to reveal rows of curved fangs glistening in the firelight. The capybara dangled in its coils, limp but still alive, its faint squeals drowned out by the terrified murmurs of the crowd. A suffocating stillness fell over the clearing. Even the torches seemed to burn quieter, their flames shrinking back as though fearful of what was to come. The villagers pressed closer together, clutching one another, yet none dared intervene. They had seen men struck down in seconds by the snake's violent thrashing. This was no longer a rescue. It was a spectacle of power, the jungle itself reclaiming its law. The capybara's wide eyes rolled back, its chest heaving shallowly. Its muzzle opened in one final, pitiful cry. And in that instant, the anaconda struck. Its jaws clamped down, engulfing the capybara's head in a sickeningly smooth motion. Gasps broke out across the clearing as the serpent began its terrible work, muscles rippling as it swallowed, the helpless body vanishing inch by inch. Some villagers turned away, unable to watch. Others stood rooted in place, horror etched into their faces as the legend of the beast unfolded before them. By the time the capybara's final squeal faded, the truth was undeniable. The serpent had returned not just to feed, but to remind them all that in the heart of the Amazon, man was not master. The jungle belonged to the anaconda. The serpent's body shifted with deliberate strength, each ripple of its muscles drawing the capybara higher into the air. The villagers could only watch as the animal hung suspended, its sides trembling with the last remnants of life. The torchlight glimmered off its wet fur, highlighting every desperate twitch. The anaconda opened its jaws wider, the pink flesh of its maw glistening, fangs curving like ivory daggers. A hush fell over the clearing, so heavy it drowned out even the cries of the night birds. The rescuers gripped their weapons, but none moved. Every instinct screamed that if they stepped forward, the beast would turn its fury on them next. Fear bound their legs like chains. The capybara gave one final squeal, thin, broken, almost human in its sorrow. Its eyes rolled back, its body sagging as the coils tightened with merciless finality. The villagers gasped in unison. Mothers shielded their children's faces, elders muttered prayers under their breath, and the rescuers clenched their fists in impotent rage. The snake lowered its head slowly, deliberately, as though performing a ritual for the jungle itself. Its gaze swept across the humans one last time, unblinking, as if to remind them, this was its world, not theirs. Then the beast poised to strike the end of its terrible performance. The moment of horror had arrived. The air grew suffocatingly still, broken only by the low hiss of the serpent. Every coil around the capybara flexed in perfect rhythm, each contraction forcing a brittle crack from the creature's weakening frame. The villagers could hardly breathe as they watched, their torches quivering in their trembling hands. The anaconda's head swayed slowly from side to side, its jaw unhinging wider than seemed possible. the pink cavern of its throat glistening in the firelight. Droplets of saliva slid down like threads of glass, dripping onto the mud below with faint, sickening splashes. The capybara no longer fought. Its body dangled limply, eyes glazed but still open, reflecting the flames that lit its final moments. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the children's muffled sobs ceased, as though the jungle itself demanded silence for what was about to happen. The serpent lowered its massive skull until it hovered directly above its prey. Then it paused, its golden eye sweeping the villagers. The stare lingered, cold and deliberate, as if to burn a single truth into their minds. This was not simply a kill, it was a warning. The capybara's last breath escaped in a thin, whistling sigh. And with that, the beast prepared to claim what it had been denied before. The serpent's golden eyes gleamed in the torchlight as its unhinged jaws stretched wider, casting grotesque shadows across the villagers' faces. A thick hiss escaped its throat, vibrating through the clearing like a drumbeat of doom. The capybara dangled lifelessly, its soaked fur clinging to its body, its head lolling weakly from side to side. The crowd stood transfixed, unable to look away, as though some primal force bound their gaze to the horrific spectacle. With a slow, deliberate motion, the anaconda lowered its mouth until its fangs grazed the capybara's neck. The villagers gasped as one, a collective shudder rippling through them. Mothers clutched their children tighter, while the rescuers gripped their weapons, knuckles white, but still none dared move closer. The snake's muscles tightened, its coils flexing like living chains, and a guttural sound rumbled from deep within its body. Mud splashed under its shifting weight, and the night air thickened with the scent of fear and damp earth. Every second stretched unbearably, each heartbeat hammering louder than the last. The villagers knew the inevitable was moments away. The beast had reclaimed its dominion, and what came next would etch terror into their memories forever. The serpent's jaws hovered just above the capybara, strands of saliva stretching and snapping in the torchlight. The villagers held their breath as though a single sound might provoke the monster into unleashing its full fury. The capybara's body twitched faintly. Whether it was life clinging to its final thread or just the nervous tremor of fading muscles, no one could tell. That faint movement only seemed to ignite the anaconda's hunger further. Its tongue flickered rapidly, brushing against the prey's damp fur, tasting the salt of sweat and fear. The rescuers glanced at each other, desperation etched into their faces. One man raised his spear as if to try again, but his hand froze midair. He saw the serpent's massive head tilt toward him ever so slightly, its golden eyes gleaming with an intelligence far more chilling than instinct. It wasn't just feeding, it was watching them, warning them. The villagers shifted uneasily. Children whimpered into their mother's arms. The jungle pressed in from all sides, the chirps and rustles of the night swallowed into a suffocating silence. Then, with an almost ceremonial slowness, the serpent began lowering its gaping mouth toward the capybara. The shadows deepened, the air thickened, and a wave of dread washed over every witness. The final act was about to begin. The clearing was silent, as if the entire jungle leaned in to witness the moment. The anaconda's colossal head inched lower, jaws yawning wide, the dark cavern of its throat glistening with thick saliva. Each drop struck the mud below with a faint plop, the sound unnaturally loud in the hush. The capybara's limp frame swayed within the crushing coils, its eyes dull, yet still open, reflecting the trembling flames of the villagers' torches. To them, it looked like a plea frozen in time, a cry that would never reach their ears. The rescuers tightened their grips on their spears, but their feet felt anchored to the ground. Every instinct screamed to act, yet the serpent's sheer size radiated a warning. One wrong step and they too would be dragged into the coils. The snake's tongue flickered, brushing across the capybara's neck. The villagers shuddered. Mothers pulled their children closer, men swallowed hard, and still not one dared break the invisible line that separated them from the beast. With an almost ritualistic precision, the serpent shifted its coils, tilting the capybara's head back to align perfectly with its gaping maw. The movement was deliberate, final, as though the jungle itself demanded the sacrifice. A heavy hiss rolled from deep within the snake's chest, vibrating through the night air. And then it began. The capybara's snout disappeared first, sliding past the curved fangs into the cavernous dark of the anaconda's maw. The villagers cried out, some turning their faces away, others frozen in macabre fascination. The torches quivered in their hands, each flame reflected in the serpent's gleaming eyes. The snake's coils flexed again, tightening as its jaws stretched wider. Bit by bit, the capybara's head was engulfed, its wide, lifeless eyes vanishing into the pulsing throat. A sickening sound echoed through the clearing, the wet, rhythmic gulp of the beast beginning its feast. The rescuers clenched their fists, teeth grinding with helpless rage. They had once torn this animal from the jaws of death, but now they could only watch as the jungle reclaimed its dead. The serpent adjusted its grip, muscles rippling beneath its glossy scales, dragging more of its prey inward. The capybara's body slid deeper, its shoulders vanishing past the snake's monstrous jaws, the outline already visible as a bulge traveling down the muscular neck. The villagers' silence deepened into something heavier than fear: acceptance. None dared step forward. None dared interrupt the ritual. Above them, the jungle canopy whispered with the night breeze, as though the forest itself bore witness to the spectacle. And in that moment, it was clear. This was not just a meal. It was a message. The monstrous coils shifted again, tightening with deliberate rhythm, pushing the capybara's limp body deeper into the serpent's gullet. The bulge along the snake's neck swelled grotesquely as its jaws stretched wider, the skin pulling taut over muscles built for crushing and consuming. The villagers gasped as the capybara's midsection vanished into the beast. Its hind legs kicked weakly once, twice, then fell limp, dangling uselessly before they too were dragged into the endless darkness of the serpent's maw. Each swallow echoed wetly in the night air, mingling with the crackle of torches and the panicked breaths of the humans watching. The sound was obscene, primal, a reminder that they stood on ground ruled not by men, but by something older and merciless. A rescuer dropped to his knees, head bowed, unable to watch any longer. Another turned away, muttering prayers through clenched teeth. Mothers shielded children's eyes, though many peeked through trembling fingers, unable to resist witnessing the horror that would haunt them forever. The serpent's body convulsed once more, its throat expanding as the last of the capybara slipped inside. The final glimpse of its fur vanished behind the beast's jaw, swallowed whole. The coils loosened, falling away from the splintered remains of the pen. Mud and water splashed as the anaconda lowered its massive head to the ground, its body rippling with satisfaction. The bulge of the capybara stretched grotesquely beneath its scales, sliding slowly down into the depths of its body. And then, silence. The jungle acknowledged its victor. The beast had taken back what was once denied. The villagers stood in stunned silence, their torches crackling softly as the serpent shifted its massive body. The swollen bulge of the capybara moved slowly along its length, grotesquely stretching the glossy green-black scales. Every ripple of muscle pushed the prey deeper into the abyss, each convulsion a reminder of nature's cold inevitability. Some turned away, tears streaming down their faces. Others could not look elsewhere, their horror binding them to the spectacle. The children whimpered in their mother's arms, but even their cries seemed muted, swallowed by the oppressive weight of the jungle night. The anaconda lifted its head, tongue flickering, tasting the air thick with human fear. Its golden eyes lingered on the crowd, unblinking, deliberate. In that gaze was something more than hunger. It was a warning, a declaration of dominion. Slowly, with terrifying grace, the serpent began to retreat. Its immense body slid back toward the riverbank, scales glistening wet under the faint moonlight. The bulge of the consumed capybara dragged through the mud, leaving a trail as the beast disappeared into the dark waters once more. The ripples spread across the surface, then faded into stillness. The forest sounds did not return. The silence remained heavy, absolute. The rescuers lowered their weapons, shame and fear written across their faces. They had once saved the capybara, but the jungle had reclaimed it. And deep within the water, beneath the shroud of the Amazon night, the serpent waited. patient, eternal. The jungle was quiet once more, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a warning delivered. The villagers stood together in the clearing, their torches burning low, eyes fixed on the dark river where the anaconda had vanished. No one spoke. Words felt useless in the face of what they had witnessed. They had fought, they had dared to challenge the beast once, but in the end, nature had reclaimed its right. The rescuers looked down at their mud-streaked hands, the same hands that had once pulled the capybara to safety. Now those memories seemed hollow, mocked by the reality that survival in the Amazon was never guaranteed, not even for those saved by human courage. That night, mothers warned their children to stay away from the water's edge. Elders told old stories of serpent spirits that punished those who tried to interfere with the balance of the forest. And in every whispered tale, one truth remained. The giant anaconda was still out there, watching, waiting. And anyone who crossed its path would remember. In the heart of the Amazon, man was never the master. If this story gripped you, share it. Let others witness the raw power of nature.